So this is our first session of the Pivot to InfoSec 2020 Virtual Summit. We have Brandon Keith here. Brandon Keith joined Appalachia in 2018, and he led the cybersecurity practice there. Before that, he had experience in both public sector and private sector IT consulting. He served in various security roles over the past 12 years, including ethical hacking, cybersecurity strategy, regulatory compliance, cyber defense. He's also taught cybersecurity studies for several world-leading cybersecurity boot camps and universities, among them Harrisburg University, the University of Phoenix, and some local cybersecurity community meetings. He's chaired the PA Hacker Cybersecurity Group. He's a co-founder of BSides Harrisburg. He's presented at conferences all over the place, including BSides Delaware, Long Island, and Harrisburg. He also has a master's degree in cybersecurity and information assurance from Western Governors University. Is that a master's or a bachelor's?
That is a master's.
You're ahead of me. I only have the bachelor's from there. And he has a bachelor's degree in information technology and numerous security certifications, including CEH, the Cyber Hacking Forensic Investigator, and Pentest Plus, amongst others. So as you can see, we have a very qualified speaker that we are privileged to have. And Brandon is going to speak on building out a cybersecurity career roadmap, which he obviously has a lot of experience with. So welcome, Brandon, and I will let you take it from here.
All right. Thank you so much, William. I am so happy to be here tonight. And cybersecurity is something that is near and dear to my heart. Without that, we're going to get started. I think William did a really good job of just introducing who I am. I do have a long bio because I've done a lot of things, and I'm proud to have done a lot of things in cybersecurity. But the key thing is I'm very passionate about this field, and I'm passionate about other people getting into this field because every now and then I like to sleep, and we don't have enough people. So the more people we get into this field, the more sleep other cybersecurity professionals in the field might be able to get. So on tonight's agenda, we're going to give a brief history of cybersecurity. Where did this whole thing start? When did it start even becoming the word cybersecurity? Because it's not always been called that. We're going to talk about the current skills gap. Is there a skills gap? We hear about this a lot. We talk about it. People can't seem to make up their mind whether there really is a skills gap or there's not a skills gap. I'm going to put that hopefully to rest tonight and talk a little bit about what people mean when they say skills gap. We're going to talk about the different job roles in cybersecurity because there's quite a few of them, and maybe help you decide which role is the right one for your career. We're going to talk about certifications versus degrees versus experience because that's a big deal. Do I need experience? Do I need degrees? Do I need this certification? Do I need a combination? What makes sense for me? We're going to talk about that as well. And then we're going to talk about building your personal career roadmap. Just like when you're going and doing anything that is sophisticated, or you're going to spend a lot of money, especially if you're going to invest in education and certifications and training. What am I investing towards? What is my end goal? You want to start with the end in mind. So we're going to start with a brief history of cybersecurity. The very first computer worm was actually developed in 1971. So it goes back quite a long time. We're talking almost 50 years of cybersecurity history. In 1984, we had the very first data breach. We didn't hear about them like we do today, but in 1984, we had a data breach, and the very first denial of service attack in 1989. At this point, cybersecurity was already kind of a big deal. The very first computers didn't even have passwords. Security was somewhat lackluster in the 70s and the 80s. Because there just wasn't that many computers. If you wanted a computer, it was very, very expensive to get a hold of a computer. They took up entire rooms. If someone was going to hack into systems, they already had to have access to a lot of large computer complexes to begin with, or very large organizations. In 1999, this all changed, and more so 98. It did change a little bit in 95, but 98 was a huge turning point with the release of Windows 98. Computers started to get a lot cheaper. They started to get integrated into everything we do, and things just kind of took off. We know in 2001 with Windows XP, personal home computers became a lot of the norm. And that was when antivirus kind of started to take off. In the 90s, there was a huge rise in antivirus providers, Norton, McAfee, all of the ones, some of them still around today, some of them not around today, can trace a lot of their roots back to those 90s viruses. Now, back then, it wasn't necessarily called a cybersecurity position. Back then, it might have even been called management information systems security, or it might have been called information assurance. Job titles were very different back then, even though it was a similar role. We then see this from kind of the 2000s up until only 5 to 8 years ago. The job title was information security professional, and you'll still see that. You'll see InfoSec in a lot of places. Why? Because that was the term that kind of stuck in the 2000s, and it stuck with us until now. You kind of you'll see information security professional. You'll also see cybersecurity professional. Cybersecurity is the new one. So when you're looking for jobs, if you're looking for a cybersecurity job, it might not even say cybersecurity. It might say information security professional. It might still say some other, it might be IT security for short. You're going to have a lot of different job titles. So when you're looking for jobs, it's good to be aware of what exists so you know what to look for, that they're going to be under different names. So in 2003, the first hacktivist group, Anonymous, was started, and FISMA was actually created in 2003 as well. And then in 2012, you have the LinkedIn breach, a lot of other breaches by then, Sony, and then WikiLeaks, and some of the other breaches in 2016. And I'm sure many of you know some of the other breaches that have occurred. Cybersecurity is in the news a lot. It's become a big deal for many industries. So I'm going to introduce you to an excellent resource when you're planning out your cybersecurity career. And this is a resource called Cyberseek. It's one of my favorite resources. Now, Cyberseek has an interactive map. And on this interactive map, it will actually show you the number of cybersecurity professionals that exist in the United States. So we can actually see in the workforce, there's about 922,000 cybersecurity professionals in the United States. That's it. That's all of the professionals in the United States. And then there is about 507,000 job openings. Now, the unemployment rate for cybersecurity professionals tends to be pretty low. It's not quite 0%, because that's pretty impossible to get, but it tends to be within, the 1 to 3%, and it tends to be lower than other industries. And look at the supply. So the supply of cybersecurity workers is very low, and you can actually see different areas where there's high supply. So look at California, 67,000 jobs, Virginia, 54,000 jobs, Pennsylvania, 14,000. But then there are some other rural areas that have less jobs, right? Montana only has 624, and Idaho only has about 1,300. So there are certain areas where there's not quite as many job openings. Now, some of those jobs might actually be being worked and they're under a different name, because remember, cybersecurity is still rather new and there's still some naming conventions. Now, the other thing you can get here from Cyberseek is you can actually see how many job postings are requesting different certifications and how many people have those certifications. So you can see there's about 151,000 people that have the CompTIA Security Plus, and 47,000 people or 37,000 jobs that are asking for that certification. So if you're saying, what are the certifications different employers are asking for? Well, this is it right here. And you can actually see with the CISSP, there's actually more job openings requesting that certification than certification holders. What does that mean? That means just having that certification can give you a very good edge in potentially getting a job because there are just not enough people to fill the demand. So now let's talk about a career pathway. Okay, so I've seen this. What's that mean for careers? How do I get into this cybersecurity thing? I see there's a lot of jobs potentially, but how do I get them? Where do I go from here? Well, we want to start planning out your cybersecurity career. And when we look at cybersecurity, one thing that a lot of people have told me is they see a lot of entry-level job positions requiring 3 to 5 years experience, and they're classified as entry level. And a lot of people ask me, Brandon, how do I get that 3 years experience without a job? It's supposed to be entry level, but I can't get that experience. And the way to solve that is with the feeder roles. And what a feeder role is it is a different role within IT that you have before you transition into cybersecurity. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to have a feeder role. You don't necessarily have to be a software developer or be in networking or systems engineering / systems administration to be in cybersecurity. But what that does typically mean is that you will have a harder time finding an entry-level job if you don't have any experience in the feeder role. And this makes a lot of sense. If you think about networking, for instance, if you're hiring specifically a network security engineer, wouldn't it make sense that they need to know everything that a networking engineer would know and the security components on top of it? If you're doing security like AppSec, wouldn't it make a lot of sense if you knew how to build applications as a software developer? Same with systems administration. If you're tasked with locking down Windows, Linux, systems, and software, wouldn't it be helpful to actually know how to set that stuff up to begin with? And that becomes the area that makes it difficult to get entry-level positions in cybersecurity. There is so much knowledge that you need before you even enter into cybersecurity. There's knowledge that is almost assumed that you have to have. That means that you may have to settle for your first job, might be on an IT help desk. It might be systems administration, but the goal is to get that experience and transfer into a cybersecurity role. Now, that's not to say you can't necessarily get lucky and through studying the right things, you might get a direct cybersecurity role. It's just a little bit more difficult. So let's look at some of these pathways. So you might cybersecurity specialist / technician. So if we look at that role, we can actually see it gives an top opening job openings. 10,412, and the average salary is $89,000. And you'll say, "Wow, Brandon, that sounds like a really good starting average salary." But what if we look at what a networking engineer is? Like, we can start looking at some of the salaries for some of these other jobs, like maybe a networking engineer, and we'll see the salary drop from 89,000 to 40,000. So when you start looking at this, so the entry-level jobs and the salaries in cybersecurity aren't necessarily truly reflective of all the experience you need when you're first getting that job. That inflates the salaries, and the salaries also are inflated because there is a low supply. That means that it's easier for cybersecurity professionals to potentially negotiate with their companies and get higher salaries. So based off this pathway, you can kind of start to map out, so what are the areas I need to get experience in? Now, if we're looking at cybersecurity specialist or technician, in Cyberseek, we can actually scroll down to the bottom, and it will give us an idea of what the common job titles are under that section. It will also tell us, based off the NICE framework, what the different areas of knowledge we might need to know for that job, such as customer service and technical support. And it will give us a bunch of information on what those skills and things we need to learn in order to be potentially successful in that career. Now, NICE has built all of this out to make it a lot easier for both employers to hire cybersecurity professionals and training institutions to train to the skills that are needed for the various cybersecurity roles. So regardless whether you're looking to be a cybersecurity consultant, an analyst that might be on the blue team doing SOC work, or maybe even penetration testing, this is a good way for you to start to gauge what are the things I need to learn, what are the skill sets I need to master to move into this field. So now let's talk about what is entry level, right? We talk about entry level, and this is kind of a difficult topic. And as we look through these, I want people to keep in mind what is required for these job roles. Is it a certification? Is it a degree? Is it experience as we go through these? So the first one we're going to look at, entry level security analyst. That's the title of this job. So minimum of 2 years experience in information technology, right? So there's that previous experience just in IT, or a 4-year degree from an accredited university. So we see here, so you can substitute, you need that experience or you need that degree. Now, a combination would probably be helpful too. If you had 1 year of experience and an associate's degree, I would still apply for this job. If you have 6 months experience and are working towards a degree, maybe apply for this job. Depending on the employer and who they're looking for, they may be willing to bring you in and train you on some of these areas. And normally, if you apply, it depends on the hiring manager, of course, but there's normally some flexibility depending on your background and what your skill set is. So let's look at the next one. So associate cyber info assurance analyst. I told you the titles get a little weird, right? So here's all the perform assessments, establishes strict. So this is a lot of information, a lot of responsibilities. So bachelor's degree with 0 years of experience, or an associate's degree with 2 years experience, or a high school diploma / GED with 4 years of relevant experience, must have current DoD IAM level 1 security certifications such as Security Plus, or have the ability to attain one in 6 months, must have active DoD security clearance. So you notice up here, the qualifications aren't bad, right? So bachelor's degree with 0 years of experience, or if you have 4 years of relevant experience, which would be any of that IT experience, 4 years help desk, 4 years networking, 4 years maybe even in software development that might be related to this job, you could apply for this, right? But then there's a lot of other caveats. So now you need a certification or be able to get one in 6 months, and you need that clearance. And you need to be willing to work non-standard hours. So there's some additional requirements. That makes it a little harder. And keep in mind, all of these are entry level or classified as entry level. So here's another one, junior cybersecurity specialist. The candidate should have a bachelor's degree or higher in computer science and some programming experience with Java is highly desired. That's it. And the ideal candidate is graduating student in 2019 or 2020 with minimal experience. So this job almost pretty much requires that you have a degree. They're looking for someone right out of school. And there is no additional guidance on if it's okay to apply if you're not. So here is an IS security engineer / tester entry level. So assist senior engineers and testers to assess mission critical enterprise systems and applications. And I copied this word for word, right? So if the words are together, that's the way the job posting was. So right here, BS degree, but a preferred master's degree in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. This is considered an entry-level position. Now, the job salary on this one, I think, started at $50,000. So it's a little $50,000 to $70,000. So this is pretty, higher for an entry-level position, I guess. But if you have a bachelor's or even a master's, I mean, that's a lot of school to go through for this entry-level position. And again, there's no information about, hey, if I don't have a bachelor's, but I have this amount of experience, can I apply here? So here is a SOC analyst, a junior SOC analyst position. So high school graduate or GED, security-related certification to the ANSI ISO standards. It's required within 90 days of employment and related work experience of 0 to 2 years. So this is a little bit more clear-cut, right? So if you have related IT experience, again, and you have or can get a certification, they don't really care if you have the degree or not. So if you are looking to get in and you have some related technical experience, but you don't necessarily have degrees, this would be something you might look for. So now cybersecurity analyst entry level. So this is, oh man, I copied this wrong. So I don't actually have that one. That's fine. We'll move on to the next one. So here is computer digital forensics technician entry level. 4-year BS degree, strong background in Microsoft Excel, EnCase, all of those. You see ability to program in various languages. So they're looking for an entry-level position. So here we see just 4 years, bachelor's degree. Again, no information on if you can apply if you don't have a bachelor's degree. So what's the verdict? Certifications versus degrees versus experience? It really depends. What job are you applying for and what is the employer asking for? There's lots of employers that are asking just for degrees. There's ones that are asking specifically just for certs. There's ones that only care about experience. And then there's ones that require all three, where you have to have this much experience, these degrees, and these certifications to even get in. Now, unfortunately, companies can ask whatever they want. It's their requirements, their jobs that they're putting out there. But you can see there's not really any consistency in what an entry-level job in cybersecurity is. For some jobs, you can get right in there. For a lot of them, you kind of need experience in those feeder roles. So building out that career roadmap. This is part of that nice framework we referenced when we were looking at Cyberseek. It divides all the areas of cybersecurity into these specific components. So analyze, securely provision, oversight and development, collect, operate, maintain, protect and defend, and investigate, which is typically forensics. Cybersecurity is a very broad field and it's growing as technology continues to advance. Now, here is a breakdown of what those different areas might be. So, for example, if you're looking to do digital forensics, and that's something that you're really interested in, looking at cyber investigation and digital forensics and some of the areas under those jobs that might be required will be helpful so you can build your skill set or get specific training in that area to be able to apply for that type of role. Now, here's some additional descriptions of what each of those look like, from securely provision all the way down to investigate. So you can see each one of them is kind of an overarching area, depending on what you want to do in the field. For example, oversee and govern provides leadership, management, direction, or development, and advocacy so the organization may effectively conduct cybersecurity work. Well, that sounds a lot like what a CISO does, right? And that would be where a lot of those would come in, right? So that job role, those skills fit into that CISO role. A CISO is probably going to have some business knowledge. They're likely going to need to be well-spoken and understand some things you might not need in other roles. Unlike protect and defend, identifies, analyzes, and mitigates threats to internal information technology systems or networks. So that might be closer to a SOC analyst or even a security systems administrator. So you can start to see how these different areas are going to impact and allow you to build out what makes sense for your career. So what are the key takeaways tonight? You want to build out a plan. Think about what it is you want to do in cybersecurity. And you can even start with just an Excel spreadsheet. What are the areas or job roles that you want to get to? Do I need to build out a skill in this level to get to help desk? Do I need to build out this skill level to get to junior SOC analyst? Then how long do I need to build up experience in that before I move on to the next step? Is there a next step? In general, for your career, I encourage everyone to think about what is that next step. The first step might be acquiring that specific entry-level job, but how long do I stay in that entry-level job? Do I want to work in help desk for 5 or 10 years? Probably not. So at what time do I have enough experience that I need to start looking to apply at other places? Keep in mind that the average in IT for job turnover is about 9 months. That means you'll see that people change jobs very often in the IT field. This is included in cybersecurity. It's often very rare when I go to conferences that a cybersecurity professional is working at the same place for more than 3 years. It's just that competitive of a market. People are constantly stealing cybersecurity professionals from other companies, and it can get pretty bad sometimes. And it's because there's such a lack of good skill set needed. And when you think about it, if you were doing physical security, like say you were hiring a bodyguard, would you want a bodyguard who it's their first day on the job, or would you want a bodyguard that has some experience and has seen some action? You'd probably want the bodyguard that has seen some action. And when organizations are looking to hire security, they're looking at, hey, we've had a security incident. Maybe there's been a breach. Maybe there's been something else that scared us into making this investment. And they're all of a sudden they want the best of the best, or the best they can get for their budget. So you'll see a lot of ridiculous requirements because they're trying to verify that they're getting the best cybersecurity person they can get. What that means is you see a lot of senior level job postings out there on Indeed and LinkedIn, and not as many entry-level jobs. Understand the different cybersecurity roles. Figure out if pen testing is something you want to do, if being a SOC analyst is something you want to do, or forensics, or any of the other areas in cybersecurity. Maybe you want to work in consulting. Maybe you want to work just for a specific company. Start to figure that out now, because that's going to help you as you do your job search. You can also figure out if there's a certain industry you want to specialize in. For example, for restaurants, they tend to have a lot with PCI compliance because they take credit cards. If you're working in a college or university, they often have to deal with FERPA. If you're working in the government, you may have to deal with FISMA compliance. There's certain areas you can start to specialize yourself based on the industry you want to be in. Start planning for that now. And just starting on an Excel spreadsheet is all you need to do. You could even do a Word document if you don't have Excel. And the key thing, the third thing that you need to do is really study, practice, and perfect your skills, whatever that might be, including public speaking, because I think that's helpful for anyone in any field, is to work on public speaking skills and continue to work to excel in those areas. Work on those social skills. Once you get to an interview, it's really about selling yourself. And that's half the battle of getting a job. It's not just getting that call or being brought in. You really have to sell yourself sometimes to get the job. That doesn't mean let yourself be taken advantage of, but just know that if it's a job you really want, know how to sell yourself really well. And for any of the tech skills, make sure you practice in either a home lab or something like Try Hack Me or any other kind of online lab. So that way your skills are built up. All right. And I think we have some time for questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending my session. Hey, Ken, don't be discouraged. So, Ken, you said this is slightly discouraging to hear about the qualifications for these entry-level positions. It can be a little discouraging, but remember, you can still get an entry-level position into IT. You might just have to wait a little bit until you get that experience to move into cybersecurity. Now, one area that makes it a little easier to work in cybersecurity, especially if you're a programmer or you're into development right now, is by participating in open source cybersecurity projects. Because by coding cybersecurity tools, not only are you getting more programming experience, which is, fine, there's nothing wrong with that, you're also building up additional experience related to cybersecurity. And I can tell you that in an interview, that looks really good when someone has written an open source tool that a lot of people use, for example, or that they have worked on those kind of projects. Similar to how you think of it, if it's a web developer, they often have a portfolio. If you have certain projects you can show or things you've done in an interview, that can speak volumes compared to other applicants. If you're coming from the accounting world, Ken, you may want to look into auditing. There's a lot of area for cybersecurity auditing, and there may be there's a little bit of crossover, not a ton, but a little bit in how some of that is done. So that may be an area of interest where you can utilize some of those skills you already have. If you're working in network engineering or data engineering for architecture, Kyle, that might make sense to look at something such as cloud security. So with there's a lot of positions that are starting to open up for cloud architecture security. They're relatively new, but it may be an area of interest to look at. I've even seen consulting companies starting to do things like Azure cybersecurity assessments, Amazon. So if you have specific architecture experience or even network experience, look at where you can start to specialize in for security and take advantage of any of that previous skill set you have. Excellent, Kyle. So it sounds like you're already working in that direction. That's perfect. Yes, Chris talked about using Virtualbox. Definitely use Virtualbox. I like VMware Workstation, but it does cost a little bit more. But I do like that you can spread out using VMware Workstation to multiple screens. I have 4 screens set up here right now. And for labs that I do, using 4 screens makes it a lot easier. I can spread my Kali Linux or any of my things that I'm working on across all my screens, and that's really helpful. So depending on what you're doing and how often you're in labs, that might be helpful. Again, getting into things like TryHackMe, IT Pro TV, any of the hands-on stuff is going to be extremely helpful as you're trying to learn some of those technical skills. There's definitely worthwhile areas and looking into things such as data analytics and automation. So automation is a big part of a lot of companies. There's plenty of jobs out there for Ansible engineers now and Python engineers that just focus mainly on automation. In cybersecurity, we're seeing that as well. And that's kind of what some people have termed the DevSecOps roles, where they're automating software builds, but sometimes people from those roles even get pulled into just automating everything and anything. And you see a little bit of that. So there's definitely a good reason to look and have knowledge in those skill sets. But again, you might want to look at specific jobs that you might want, because these jobs can get really specific. Like you can have a job title of Ansible cybersecurity engineer, and it can get very specific to the technology. And you want to be careful with that because technologies change rapidly, and you have to be okay if you're investing in a very specific technology that it might go away tomorrow. A lot of people invested in Flash development back in the early 2000s only for all their knowledge in ActionScript to become obsolete a couple years later. Nick, one of the things I would say, if you're looking to specifically prove that you know specific things, is projects are really helpful. If you're looking for a cybersecurity position, such as penetration testing, that sometimes can, it doesn't always, but can require, especially some knowledge in programming, especially if you're doing reverse engineering, having any kind of portfolio or projects, or especially if you've found publicly available vulnerabilities, if you've done things with bug bounty and can show that you've been rewarded bug bounties, that can look amazing on a resume, especially to a hiring manager that knows the value of those things. Not every hiring manager is going to know that that's valuable, but some might. And those things, those little things on your resume will help prove that you know what you're talking about. Certifications also help a little bit. If you get the OSCP, most people will know that you went through a real hands-on cybersecurity certification. So they know that your certification might be a little bit more valid than maybe a multiple choice certification. Certifications, that's kind of what they're there for. They're to certify that you have a skill set or a knowledge in this area. They don't always work so well because a lot of people cheat on certifications. Not saying that everyone does, but it has gone to discredit certifications recently. So for importance of thing, that's another great question, Nick. Nick asks, how would you choose the importance of things? And I think you mean the order that you would go in. Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, Hacker Rank, or Leak Codes, certificates, webinars, GitHub commits. So it depends on what you want to do. If you are just looking to, if you're looking to start learning programming, not just for cybersecurity, but just because you want to improve your skills in that, and that'll help you in cybersecurity, but you may be looking to do that feeder role into programming. HackerRank is a great way to get started. I really like HackerRank. I've enjoyed working through HackerRank, and it helps you think mathematically, not just syntactically about what you're writing. You learn about algorithms that you need to do, like the actual mathematical algorithms that we all learned in high school and then promptly forgot on graduation day. We go back and revisit them and actually use them in a real life scenario, which is kind of nice. For Try Hack Me, I like Try Hack Me a little better than Hack the Box because I think it's a little more user friendly, especially when you're new. And the tutorials in there are just really helpful for solidifying and learning new skills. Not all Try Hack Me's are perfect, but it's a great platform. For blue team training, honestly, some of the best certifications I've seen are some of the CompTIA certifications, like the CISA certification, the Security Plus certification. You learn a lot of great things about blue team from those certifications. And while they may not necessarily challenge you with a hand-on exercise, there is a lot of really good information about that just from studying for those exams. So I think if you're looking to do more blue team, I started out in cybersecurity, Security Plus with this first certification I got, and I learned so much about cybersecurity just from studying for the Security Plus and being forced to sit down and comb over all that information. So that's where I would start, is to look towards doing that first. Now the A Plus and the Network Plus, they're also excellent, and you shouldn't necessarily ignore them and go straight for Security Plus, but I think the Security Plus helps cover a lot of fundamentals. And sometimes I give CompTIA slack, but I think they did a really good job in the different areas they hit with that certification. Oh, yes. And Ian, I hope I'm saying your name right, is Ian. He said that for CompTIA, you also knock out a few DoD requirements with Security Plus, CISA, and CSAP. That's also a really good point. If you're looking to do that in your career, specifically in government, that's also a very good option since a lot of their certifications are required for different jobs within the DoD. All right. Thank you, everyone. If you want to talk more, I'm going to be in the Harrisburg University booth. So after this session, if you want to have a chat, talk about the different programs at Harrisburg University or just cybersecurity in general, feel free to join that room and find me. Thank you again for joining my session and being part of Pivot to InfoSec.